Um, at the beginning of this module, Chris Foster brought two things to our attention in talking about Shang. And one was the bronzes, the other was these dragon bones, oracle bones, and the advent of writing. Now is the time to talk to Chris in a bit more depth about what we mean by how we should understand what the significance is of these bones. But first, Chris, to what degree is your own work, your own research, concerned with this sort of thing? How does this tie into the things you care about?
Sure, definitely. My own research actually involves writing a history for writing itself in early China, though it actually deals with slightly later periods, the end of the Warring States period and into the Han Dynasty. And what I want to do is look at what the manuscript culture was like for those periods, how texts were produced, how they circulated, how visible they were, what literacy was like. But I also want to do an intellectual history for writing and talk about how people related to text, how they understood writing and the philosophy of language. So I'm very interested in the early history of writing, and in particular using sources that are slightly different from what we've been looking at before, which is actually excavated manuscripts. So that is writing that is on artifacts.
Right. And these bones have the very first writing.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Yes, they do.
So what are the bones?
So the first thing we have to talk about here is the actual material, which is obviously bone. It's generally either ox scapula, which is the shoulder blade, or turtle plastrons, which is the underbelly of the turtle. You'll notice here that most of these are only fragments. However, oftentimes when they are archaeologically excavated, we get whole pieces. And in fact, we can see parts or nearly complete pieces here of the turtle plastrons. You'll notice right here. These bones are prepared in a certain fashion. They are
when you
generally
mean prepared, you mean by museums or?
Oh no, actually in antiquity,
I see.
They were prepared. You'll notice there's all these marks on the turtle plastron here. Generally, what happens is the bone was leveled. Certain layers were scraped off, such as the scute. But even more interesting are these little divots here that we call hollows, which was preparation for divination.
The lower right-hand corner.
Yes,
is a really
good zoom view. Right. You can see there's something of a vertical line and a horizontal line together, sort of like a T that's been tipped over there. You'll also notice that there's a lot of burn marks, which is evidence for how they actually went about conducting the divination.
And so when you say how they conducted the divination, tell us more. I mean,
Sure.
What do we think they did?
So again, it's hard to know in the earliest pieces that we have, but what we believe happened was they'd prepare these hollows, and they'd take a rod, and they'd heat it up so it was very hot, and they'd stick this hot rod into the hollow, and hopefully what would happen is after a period of time, there would be a crack or a fissure on the other side of the bone. We don't know exactly what they did with this crack. Some scholars believe that they listened to the actual sound of the popping, the pop, pop, or the poo, which is why for the character, which you can see on the screen here, the later character of boo, which means divination, is perhaps actually sounded as boo. This might be mimicking the early sounds of the crack.
Pop.
Of pop, yeah, right, exactly. Right. There is also sort of later evidence in the textual record that the cracks were instead red. They were actually looked at, and certain features of this boo sign meant different things to these early diviners.
So it would be sort of like if you had the crack went down like this or like that or like that.
Exactly.
It would have different meaning.
Exactly. Okay. But the earliest records that we have, manuals for how to read these sort of divination cracks, only date to the Han Dynasty, which is already 1,000 years later. So we really don't know.
Right. So this gets us to what I guess interests me the most, which is the writing on it, because the writing doesn't begin right away. I mean, we have a whole series of oracle bones with no writing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And writing begins at a certain moment. And what are they writing? What's there to read?
What we have here is generally very small here. Why don't we turn one of these over so you can actually see the writing.
Show it to me.
You can see
yeah.
right there. And actually we have the boot character right there. What we find in the corpus of Shang materials are very terse divination statements that can be divided up into roughly 6 parts. The first part is a preface, which usually includes a cyclical date, a day date. It sometimes includes the diviner, and very rarely the location where the divination took place. After that, we have a charge, which is the topic of the divination. This is generally followed, or sometimes followed, by a crack number or a crack notation, such as auspicious or inauspicious. After that, we'll have a prognostication, generally done by the king. And very, very rarely after that, we'll have a verification. So what would a typical divination statement sound like? And I actually have prepared one here. Pull it up. So for instance, we'll have a preface, crack making on the G-mile day, which is the 16th day, tre divined. And then we get to the charge, it will rain. Next, we have a prognostication. The king read the cracks and said, if it rains, it will be on a Ren day. Then we have a verification. On the Renwu day, day 19, it really did rain.
So if I understand, looking at this, your one example here, the first thing that's said is the charge is it will rain, a positive statement. And the answer to that can be yes or no. But they've done more than that. They haven't just said yes or no. They've said, well, it will rain, yes, but on a certain day?
Sometimes. You don't always find the same formula for prognostication. In this one instance, yeah.
Usually I thought it was sort of yes-no answers, right?
Well, it's hard to tell, actually, what the charge actually is. Is it a question? Is it a command? We don't know this.
It could also be sending a message
It could say,
do this.
it will rain.
But the guy comes back and says, well, no, it will rain, but only on that day.
Yes, and what's intriguing is actually we often find these divination statements in pairs, where the charge will both be positive in one statement and then negative in the other.
So that sort of says you can agree with one or the other.
Exactly.
I see, okay. But there are a whole bunch of other kinds of questions too. I mean, questions of, to the ancestors, what do you want? Do you want grain? Do you want a sacrifice of wine? Do you want sacrifice of boys, girls, 2 boys, 3 boys? There's a whole range of things that we find here. What's really extraordinary is that the last 200 years of the Shang dynasty, from I guess around 1250 BC, or BCE, that the last 200 years has been reconstructed from these charges on oracle bones, and is confirmed, in fact, what we find in some of the textual sources about who the kings were when.
Yep,
right?
definitely.
So there's this wonderful confluence at this point of the historical record, the textual record, and the artifactual record on these bones. And it's given us tremendous insight into Shang history in a way we couldn't have it before. So in some sense, we could say this is the beginning of written history in China.
That we can.
Good.